Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this exciting show this morning on the 6th day of July. And of course, it is a sunny day here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Well, and the temperature here is 13 degrees centigrade, and it is a beautiful time of the year when it's nice, cool and cold. I know some people find it miserable, but at least it's not sultry hot. It's a wonderful day. Well, there's lots that we're going to be talking about today. One of the major points that we're going to make today is that I believe that we are turning the corner. That means we are turning the corner on the coronavirus cases. As we know that once we start hearing something, then it starts spreading. Copycat crimes, as they know. You hear of one, and there's been many cases. I can talk about many things. Whatever comes in the media, there's more talks about it, the more you hear about that. It might be the tuning out process as well, but that's what happens. Well, right now, today, by the end of the show, you'll find out what I really mean, that we may be turning the corner around for the coronavirus restrictions. Yesterday, our Prime Minister made some remarks, and today there will be some remarks and a special commentary coming in towards the end of the show, and we will look at that. So, why and how we come into that conclusion, you'll need to remain tuned in to find out. Well, right now it's wonderful to have your company. Let's move on with first the report from Queensland.
The history of puzzling COVID-19 cases has become clearer overnight as life returns to a pandemic normal.
We're feeling pretty good at where we are at the moment.
7 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed, 4 of them local transmission, but the Chief Health Officer isn't worried.
All closely linked, and we can work through all those, and we'll be putting out any additional venues.
One, announced late yesterday, is a close contact of a case at the Greek Community Centre. Her child has also now tested positive. The other 2 new cases are the colleague and partner of the man who travelled to Yamundi.
All of these are the Alpha strain. We do not believe that the Delta variant is circulating in our community, which is excellent news.
So too is that contact tracers may have found a missing link between 3 previous cases. It turns out they'd all been to the Zeus Street Greek Kitchen at Westfield Chermside at the same time.
We're just working out all of the specifics, but we think that is probably the site of transmission.
The Southeast Alpha variant cluster now stands at more than 20 and can be traced back to a leak from hotel quarantine. The Premier says the state could do away with using hotels altogether if the Commonwealth would commit to 2 standalone quarantine sites. The 2 governments are working through a new proposal at Pinkenba near the Brisbane airport, but Anastasia Palaszczuk is also pushing a private proposal at Wellcamp near Toowoomba, which fails to meet key federal government criteria.
Why don't you just give up on Wellcamp?
Because it's fully costed, it's ready to go, it could be built in 2 months.
No, that's not deemed a suitable facility at Toowoomba.
We believe the Damascus site is a far superior approach than Wellcamp.
The Pinkenba facility could hold up to 1,450 people, with 800 people arriving per fortnight in the initial stages.
Which would allow roughly 2 repatriation flights, 2 Australian government repatriation flights a week to bring home those stranded Aussies.
But before the idea takes flight, there's weeks of detailed planning and squabbling ahead. Kate McKenna, ABC News.
There is a lot more that needs to be done. And of course, the proposal is there, but of course, there is always that little bit of politics between federal and state jurisdictions. In theory, that's a very, very good proposal. And as our Premier said, that it is fully costed. But when we look at the federal government, they said, it wasn't put together properly. It was lacking a lot of details in there as well. Well, one of the points that we made in the early discussion was that, the aged care facilities, and once this rollout of vaccine was put forward, who would be the first people to get the vaccine? And did we not agree that it would be the frontline workers? people who are caring for the elderly, people who are working in hospitals, and all the frontliners. Well, of course, as the argument was put forward yesterday about when we have the voting in the country, so we can get that done in a few days over with everyone coming to the polls and casting their votes. Why couldn't we do that similar situation with the rollout? Once again, it was based upon the supply as well. GPs are ready, new depots can be built in, temporary places, drive-in, drive-out ones can be set up as well, as long as the vaccine's there. So I think that might have been one of the problems. But right now, people are a little bit outraged that aged care facilities have workers in there who are not vaccinated at all.
Kathy Moloko, perhaps you could start by telling us how your parents are tonight.
Well, I guess I'm feeling a little flat tonight. Both are stable, but the doctors have had a chat to our family to help us to understand what having COVID means at this age with underlying health conditions. So there's really no news except that we understand the seriousness of what's ahead of them, and hopefully the vaccine does its job.
Well, you've obviously expressed considerable anger about this happening and the fact that there was unvaccinated staff in the home. The operators today have said that until the last 7 days they haven't been able to force people to have the vaccine, and that there's vaccine hesitancy amongst the workforce as there is in the rest of the community. What do you say to that?
Well, there's no question there's vaccine hesitancy. We've been talking about that for weeks because of the misinformation that's been communicated and the bungling of the vaccination program. But I've got to say, to find out that the majority of the workforce were not vaccinated, I was horrified. I mean, I feel we should have been told.
And what information have you got from the operators since all of this has happened about what they're going to do about their workforce?
Well, I mean, circulars that we get updated as families twice a day, morning and evening, and they're pretty clinical as communications. But I understand through talking to some people who've reached out to me today that there's a vaccination unit coming in tomorrow, I believe, and I also understand that 50% of their workforce is vaccinated when they said there was a third vaccinated. I just find it extraordinary that we've all had to, well, me in particular, and it's been terrifying with my parents so ill to have to speak out so loudly. But I just feel it's extraordinary with all the fuss we've had to make that only now these things are happening. I mean, it's extraordinary. I understand also that there are some very caring workers in summer care, and my comments in no way directed to them. But you would think there would have been a lot of public information communicated to staff about how important it was to be vaccinated.
Who do you ultimately hold responsible for this?
Well, I mean, that's the million-dollar question. Ultimately, it's the federal government who have only mandated that vaccination needs to be complied with by September the 1st. But I've got to say, where's the common sense in all of this? I mean, you would think people are thinking outside the square. We're in the middle of a pandemic. State government is saying it's a Commonwealth issue. Summer Care is busy telling everyone what they couldn't do. What we all want to hear as families is what are they doing? Who's responsible? Let's say there's a stuff-up, it didn't happen, and what we're going to do about it and how we're going to do about it.
Let's hear from Queensland Government.
Unprecedented opportunity for Queensland. The boost to infrastructure, the opportunity to showcase our state to the world as a destination for a holiday, but also as a destination for investment. Those sorts of things cannot be underestimated. We can see the finish line, but we're not there yet, and we just can't afford to stumble at the last hurdle, which is exactly why Queensland needs to be represented at the meeting of the International Olympic Committee in Tokyo in July. The President of the Australian Olympic Committee, John Coates, has made it clear it's absolutely imperative that our state be represented. And those people who don't want us represented simply don't understand what's at risk for our state. This pathway to future investment, this growing confidence in our state that can continue to accelerate, and the jobs and the opportunities that will come from hosting the biggest event in the world right here in our home state.
Treasurer, why didn't you provide any support to small business during last week's lockdown?
Well, we've adopted what everyone else has done. We've adopted the 7-day guideline, the 7-day rule for supporting businesses, and of course short, sharp lockdowns work. We've demonstrated that previously. We're seeing strong economic activity in Queensland, and we've seen a strong rebound after short, sharp lockdowns. That's the most effective way we can support business, to get them open and operating again, to get them doing what they do well and best, trading, and that's what we've targeted and focused on as a state.
Brisbane bars decided to put on a door fee. They said they have to do that because it's been so tough for them with all the snap lockdowns. What sort of support are they going to have?
Big pardon?
Are they going to have any sort of support, financial support on that?
I know we've made it clear, 7-day rule, that's what National Cabinet agreed, and that's what we've adopted in Queensland.
Even a short, sharp lockdown can cost businesses tens of thousands of dollars. Isn't a 7-day rule just totally arbitrary?
I know it's what National Cabinet's agreed.
But other states have compensation packages for longer.
For longer periods. What we want to avoid is exactly what's happening in New South Wales. What we want to avoid is a 14-day lockdown, and I think not just everyone in New South Wales but the rest of the country is holding its breath to see if New South Wales is going to come out of it in 14 days. We see some disregard of public health orders and public health directions in New South Wales, mask wearing not being obeyed, people attending venues when they shouldn't be. That's putting all of our economies at risk. But what we saw out of our lockdowns in January and March was a strong rebound in economic activity, in retail trade, and that continues to grow. And the ABS data released yesterday shows that businesses are operating at a level 13.5%, 13.5% higher than pre-COVID levels in May. So we are getting the benefit of short, sharp lockdowns, and that's good for the economy.
The lockdown only lasted for 4 days, but the effects on businesses like bars and nightclubs, so they still have to have masks, people sitting down, no dancing, those sort of effects linger on for weeks. Do you think any sort of targeted packages for those types of businesses? Or is that completely ruled out?
We of course monitor what's going on. We know after the January lockdown, spending bounced back by 10% in the week following the 3-day January lockdown. That's Treasury analysis. Similarly in March, retail sales are up 0.3% for the month of March, and of course that was better than most of the nation. So we'll continue to monitor that and support businesses as we can.
Sort of specific figures on how these lockdowns are affecting bars, nightclubs, restaurants?
No, not at the moment. It's just, of course, we've just come out of lockdown, so we don't have any specific data at the moment. But we'll look at more data going forward, including the ABS statistics as they come out for June.
With the large number of contact tracers exposure venues, are contact tracers struggling to keep up with the large list and the number of close contacts?
No,
The
because people
press
are doing
conference at
absolutely
Queensland.
the right thing. So I thank every single person who's checking our website and then going in through the portal and giving that information to the contact tracers. So the community helps us, and by the community helping us, we can manage all of this. So thank you.
Any idea of how many contact tracers you've had working?
I don't have that number. It's an enormous number. Yeah.
And just on the AFL for Saturday, a question. Apparently the Lions have been told they have to go to the Gold Coast first and travel back from Victoria. Do you know what's happening with their arrangements with the Lions?
I don't know, but we don't have restrictions in place for Victoria, so there must be some other issue there.
Premier, can I just get your response to the petition launched online seeking to...
Yeah, sure. Yep. Look, as I said the other day very clearly, if we're in a situation where we're in a lockdown, I won't be able to attend. But the delegation is the Federal Sports Minister, the Premier and the Lord Mayor. And it has been made very clear by John Coates that it would be a disaster if the head of Queensland did not go. And, you know, it's basically to go there, to make the pitch and to come back and then spend 14 days in hotel quarantine. And I think it's very important that we have that really strong representation of federal, state and local, because even Thomas Bach, the head of the Olympic Committee, has said the strongest thing going for our bid is the enormous cooperation of all three levels of government. And just over 2 weeks' time, we are going to learn whether or not Queensland, Brisbane will be awarded the 2032 Olympics.
What is the reason come back What tests do you tend to wait and come back?
I can get those for you.
How does the staff
Yep.
be connected to that delegation? I mean, media advisors?
No, it's only. I think it's one per person who's travelling. So the total composition is 6.
Can you see why people are frustrated though? Stranded Aussies overseas, they can't come home, and you said every day that our hotel quarantine system is bursting at the seams, but
Yep.
you'll take up a spot in hotel quarantine.
No, because what I've said clearly is that people should be fully vaccinated leaving, and I think people should be vaccinated coming back. Also, National Cabinet, the entire National Cabinet agreed to the lowering of the caps, because look what we saw today. 5 people coming into a hotel quarantine are testing positive, and the Delta strain is very prevalent across the world. So that's why I'm really pushing for this being fully vaccinated going and being fully vaccinated coming back. And in relation to hotel quarantine, we've got South Australia that's going to do that trial at the moment about people being fully vaccinated and only having to spend, I think, and going into home quarantine. So, but that trial hasn't happened yet.
But we expect waiting for our vaccination hubs around October. How would that work? Are we looking at maybe convention centres, or would that be impossible?
Look, I'm really excited for the end of the year, and I think Australians should have great hope and optimism that when we get that big supply in, that we want to see as many Queenslanders vaccinated as possible. So, you know, I think we'll move heaven and earth to make sure that we pull out all stops to do everything we possibly can to work cooperatively with the federal government to ensure that we get as many Australians vaccinated. And the sooner we get the population vaccinated, the sooner we can open even more things up.
No specific plans for that in place?
We're always looking at different convention centres. Our hubs are working really well at the moment, and like the Health Minister said yesterday, we're doing around over 90,000 vaccines per week, so the capacity is already there, and of course we can scale up.
Currently in Gympie, the hub's been delayed there. You know anything about
No, I'll find out for you.
And just on Hyperion, do you care about this petition? I mean,
Look, people are entitled to their views. I understand their views, but this is the biggest opportunity that Queensland's ever seen. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have the 2032 Olympics here in Queensland. We're never going to get that opportunity again, and I'd hate to see it fall at the final hurdle.
Premier, the check-out becomes mandatory for most of them from Friday.
So can you say that again?
The check in Queensland?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, mandatory from Friday. Yep.
How and when are you going to fix the issue of police access through search warrants and things, given that it's a promise that it wasn't going to be used for anything other than contact tracing is broken?
My understanding is just used for contact tracing. Yeah, I'll get the Health Minister. Okay.
Thank you. I understand this was an issue in Western Australia, and we've had discussions with the QPS, so the Attorney General's Office and the Queensland Police Service and my department have been talking about this issue. I understand that.
So that's the press conference happening right there in the Queensland Parliament. And of course, when we look at the scheme of things, and JP Soni, once again, another valid the point that you make out there is that Queensland government is giving out about $6,000 for solar panels, but cannot order Pfizer vaccines for all Queensland as well. That is a point there. Well, of course, today is the bid, the pitch from the Premier was that she wants to be on that on tries the number of people who are going to seal the deal, as they reckon. And many people are saying that it's a one-horse race, that there's no ends in the race. But you can never, ever take things for granted. The Olympics will mean, big turnaround for the economy here in Queensland, and especially in Brisbane. So, up till now, we have seen a pretty good cooperation between the 3 levels of government on that front. On the when you look at Adrian Strena, our Lord Mayor, how happy he was there, together with the Premier and the Olympic Bid Committee, and so showing the support. And he also mentioned that the unity that and the cooperation that was shown between the 3 levels of government on that front meant a lot. So, we need to keep that momentum and keep that going. Well, right now, as I said from the very, very beginning of the so today that we might be turning around the corner. When you hear of things, when you start hearing things, there are, you start hearing once, twice, then many other things happens. Many times, when I was dealing with the students' cases, when I was the Indian Students Liaison Officer, you heard of one Indian students being, best, then another, and then another. Well, now the news is what our Prime Minister said yesterday, that this flu and the COVID-19 is something we will have to live with. So it should be treated as any other flu and control the system, symptoms, and try and put all the safety things in place, but don't go overboard. Well, the first news or the first, public announcement and a press conference to that regard is by none other than Boris Johnson. Let's hear that.
We will change the basic tools that we have used to control human behaviour. We'll move away from legal restrictions and allow people to make their own informed decisions about how to manage the virus. From step 4, we will remove all legal limits on the numbers meeting indoors and outdoors. We will allow all businesses to reopen, including nightclubs. We will lift the limit on named visitors to care homes and on numbers of people attending concerts, theatre and sports events. We will end the 1 metre plus rule on social distancing and the legal obligation to wear a face covering, although guidance will suggest where you might choose to do so, especially when cases are rising and where you come into contact with people you don't normally meet in enclosed spaces, such as obviously crowded public transport. Will I personally wear a mask? I think that, as I said earlier on, it will depend on the circumstances, and I think that what we're trying to do is move from a universal government diktat to relying on people's personal responsibility. And clearly, there's a big difference between travelling on a crowded tube train and sitting late at night in a virtually empty carriage on the main railway.
So there you are. As we know, as our Prime Minister had already said, that this pandemic is here to stay, and at least for the next couple of years, and it will stay here. And as you just heard from Boris Johnson, that of course it is here. We will need to take precautions, but there are many things that just needs to go. Life needs to get back to normality. We need to deal with it. We need to learn to deal with it, learn to live with it. And it is a fact of life. It's a reality. And here it is, slowly we are hearing this kind of conversation and this kind of dialogue. So it must be that turning point where, we come to terms, we come to grips with this and try and do the best. Of course, I'm not saying that, everyone starts going willy-nilly, as Prime Minister Boris Johnson has also mentioned, that will he wear a mask? He said that will depend upon, common sense should prevail. If it requires and you are in such a position where you really need to protect yourself, yes, do wear that. But, if you're sitting in an empty carriage and, and if you don't have a mask, you should not be charged for that. So, these are the kind of things that are now happening. So it might be the turning point. So it is wonderful to see that, of course, happening. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now the last thing that I leave out with is that GPs are happy and they are ready and equipped to administer Pfizer vaccines.
Basically got 100 GPs per week being rolled out over July. So those numbers are actually the goal for the end of July, and then hopefully some more will actually come online in August as well. And they are spread across the countryside, but from my understanding is pretty much located in the highest areas of need and hotspots. The level of demand is going to be outrageously high, and from my perspective as a GP, I'm delighted that we're finally being able to deliver Pfizer, because as we all know, that's been the age group that we really need to get going on is the 40 to 59s, and then obviously the younger age group as well, which is all through Pfizer. So, look, the limitation has been supply. I think we're hearing across the countryside, both from the states and GPs, that the supply issue continues to be the same. So we are very fortunate in general practice. We are being given half of the supply, and if you look at the AstraZeneca or the numbers of vaccines to date, GPs have delivered more than half of the total number of vaccinations already. So we're looking forward to being able to really increase that number for us now. Our focus is on really being able to roll out vaccination to those under the age of 60 who are in the vulnerable, particularly the vulnerable groups, disability and chronic illnesses who have been unable to access Pfizer to date. What is really good about general practice is that we can very, very well accommodate people for whom the difficulties of accessing a hub overwhelm the need to have the vaccine, and we're in a really good position to be able to just roll out the numbers. So there's a lot of us, so it really, makes common sense to me that everybody can do it, and the more the better.
And as you mentioned, that common sense should prevail. Well, the problem with common sense is that it is not very common. Well, right now, that's about all we have time for in this segment. So, the sign of times to change, turning around the corner, is that, people are learning to live with this COVID-19, to live with this pandemic, deal with it. It's something that will be there. So people get vaccinated, going, and the travel, interstate and overseas should begin with, vaccinated people. And that idea of the, vaccination passport, you need a ticket to get on a flight, you need your passport, so you should also need a vaccination certificate. People get vaccinated, and of course there should be a medical examination or test done as well. So as was the case a while back, when you were even migrating to Australia from other countries, you needed to undergo a medical test. So, these things might happen, and, with common sense prevailing, rather than locking down the masses, which has consequences on a lot of businesses, especially small businesses as well, open up, but open up sensibly, and make sure that the vaccination is done, and that the Pfizer is made available. And of course, that is one of the questions that has been asked, has been put forward by the GPs and many other people, who have commented on that. So, moving forward, we'll keep an eye on the situation and see. And thanks once again for joining in. It is, in our best interest to keep this conversation going. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you everyone for your comments, and keep them coming. It gives us encouragement to keep going. And of course, it is very important that we look at the views of everyone and look at the comments. So, as JP Soni once again says, Logan do not have Pfizer vaccines. You have to go to South or get yours in AJ. So, there you go. There are situations, and many people I have come across, someone told me yesterday that I have applied, but I've been put on a waiting list. So, here we are, that, people are willing to go and get that vaccination done, but, it's not available, and they've been put on waiting list. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for joining in. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. Enjoy the day. It's gone up to 14 degrees now. Of course, sunny, looking out the window from the studios here. It's just an absolutely fantastic day, a cracker of a day here in Brisbane, Australia. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. Please enjoy the day and remain safe.